All right, this is George Howard Walker Bush, Daddy Bush, remember? These are his foreign affairs. All right, so here we go. Now, the biggest thing is that in 1989, this image is engraved in everyone's brain. This is called the Tank Man image. In Tiananmen Square, which is in China, um, the students of a college basically decided we want democracy. Now, did they want to topple all the communist regime? No. They did, however, want a little bit more freedom, a little bit more ability to read certain books, things like that. So they go out, they begin this protest in Beijing and Tiananmen Square. Other people soon join, police are leaving their ranks to come and join, and this is chaotic. Now, they are in front of the Imperial Palace, and they're there, and this is when the communist government ultimately gives the order to go and squash the revolution. In Hong Kong, because they don't officially recognize this in China, it is actually called a massacre. And China really doesn't want to discuss it. But the tanks and guards and army of China will kill some of these protesters. Now, the next day, this is where this picture takes place. The man was walking across with his groceries. He stood in the way of a line of tanks, and famously, he climbed up the tanks and began to have a conversation with the guy inside of it. But this is iconic, just like the picture in 1968 of the man putting the flower in the gun of the Armed National Guard at the Democratic National Convention. This is just kind of really iconic photograph, right? Now, what came of this? China did institute maybe some reforms, but not as much reforms as they wanted. Now, also 1989, as part of the war on drugs, we're going to begin to discover that a lot of the drugs are actually brought in from other countries. And we found out a major drug trafficker was actually in charge of a country, and it's a country we had had dealings with. It is Panama. So, the U.S. military will have Operation Just Cause. Not just 'cause. They didn't just go over there 'cause they wanted to have something, but just cause, meaning a motive, an objective, okay? And just, meaning like moral and good and true. The goal of this is to capture this man. If you've ever played Call of Duty Black Ops, you try to capture this man. His name is General Manuel Noriega. Now, in class, we're going to discuss this whole Call of Duty thing. He actually sued Call of Duty makers upon the thing that his grandchild was playing the game and said, "Hey, Grandpa, you know you're a drug trafficker and we have to kill you?" And so I'll save what happens there, and we can talk about this. But this is not uncommon. We've gone into countries before to get someone. All right? Now, we have another nuclear treaty. I know they keep coming up, right? This one's called START. It stands for Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. The S and the T comes from strategic. And you can see the whole goal here, right? You can see as of 1990 what we're looking at, and then as of 2009 you can see that the USSR has actually they've shrunk from 10,000 nuclear warheads down to 3,000, whereas the United States went down from 10,500 to about 5,000. That's still a lot of nuclear warheads. You need about 8 to destroy the world, but we are getting in a big thing, and this one is complete. We're trying to actually dispose of at this point, and that's a really important thing. Now, here comes Saddam Hussein, right? Iran-Iraq 8-year war is over. Hussein goes back. He realizes he can't win Iran, so he invades Kuwait. He couldn't wait. So he invades Kuwait, and this is about no throwing around here, oil. Saddam Hussein wants to control Kuwait, to control oil to make money for his country. The United States has actually got a couple of oil fields here in Kuwait, and so he invades the tiny nation of Kuwait, and we see this as a human rights violation. So we go to NATO and we say something's got to be done with Hussein. NATO kind of turns the thing, and they actually turn it over to the United Nations, and for the second and only second time, they authorize police action, much like they did in Korea. And again, the U.S. leads it. So the U.S. will lead Operation Desert Storm. The whole goal of this was to push Iraq back to their side, much like we did in Korea, right? The whole goal was not to kill North Korea, but simply push them back across 38th parallel. We want to push Iraq back into Iraq out of Kuwait. Now, I'm showing you this here because it became a media frenzy. Topps, who makes baseball cards and other kind of cards, actually had a set of our generals and Pentagon and all kinds of stuff like this. Now, why is this so interesting? It comes to find out later, and much later on, that Osama bin Laden actually had a complete set of these that he found on the internet and studied about generals and weaknesses and Pentagon and aerial photos. So we've got to be careful how much information we're putting out there, because who's reading these, okay? Now, did we kill Hussein? No. Remember, simply pushing him back. That was the goal, okay? Now, what are we going to do to Iraq? We're going to do something we've been doing for a long time, and that is we're going to announce sanctions and trade barriers. Now, a trade barrier first is simply something that will impede you from trading with somebody. In other words, we said, we're not trading you something. Now, a sanction, you can kind of see it there, is putting the squeeze on them. And a lot of times this is saying, okay, you have your money in this bank account. You can't get that money out of the bank account. You can't put money in. Okay, you can't get weapons, even if it's for the defense of your country. And so that thing really kind of begins to clamp down. And so Iraq kind of looks to other places, supporting other ideas. And this is kind of moving in the direction of the Islamic Jihad as we now know it in that area. Okay, so that is it for George Howard Walker Bush. The next election is going to be 1992, and we get William Jefferson Clinton.